All right, we're going to call this meeting to order. It's now 6 o'clock, August 14th, 2024. We're going to stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Akenrod, would you lead us in a prayer for me?
Heavenly Father, we do thank you for this day, and we thank you for our community and that we can gather together and discuss what's going on. Father, we thank you for the rain. We just ask for your wisdom and everything that goes on in here tonight. And Father, we just pray that we will be able to see through things, to have an understanding of your will. We ask this in the name of Yeshua Mashiach.
Thank you.
Matt, we established a quorum too.
We have a quorum here tonight. We have one member absent, which is Blake Ward. So we want a record to show that he's out today. We're going to move to item number 4, which is public comments. Now, this is public comments, not on the next item on the agenda.
Can't hear you for having.
On the public comments, this is not under the next item, which is number 5. So if y'all have your agendas, this is on regular public comments. If you have public comments against or for the next item, which is the public hearing, it's totally different. So do I have anybody with just regular comment? David.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll just stand here if I could. Hello, everyone. Dave Palmer. My public comment was relating to Dr. Hutchinson's number 11 update on the groundwater model development, just about the hydrology. I think that will come up in his presentation. Thank you for being here, Dr. Hutchison. The question that I had is, everybody is greatly thankful for the rain, and luckily for the board and for the town, the creek is back Las Moras. But Pinto, which I drive by every day on the way to work, is completely dry. So maybe in your presentation, and I don't know what you're going to cover, if you could go there. Are they on the same aquifer? Why isn't, what's going on with that? Also, related to the hydrology and the DFC, I don't know if that's going to come up, but anyway, last year we failed to meet the DFC. Hydrology is related to that. And there's a new rule that's been proposed that I'm sure you've seen that suggests the possibility of making a new rule to allow permittees to pump the highest in the last 20 years when the board decides there's a drought. And in light of the DFC, maybe that rule will come up in public comment. But in light of the hydrology, is that going to be a positive thing as we try to meet the DFC for this year? We all know that the DFC might change in 2026, but right now, how might that rule affect that, and how does hydrology support or not that particular rule? And that was all I had.
Anybody else got anything?
Just clarification. I'll let you see what my comment is, and you tell me where I need to stand up and speak.
Let's see what you got here.
It's just the bottom half. I mean, this is the legalese, but this is the bottom half. If you want me to make that comment now, or if you want me to save it, whatever.
Go ahead and do that now.
Okay. All right, Troy Hibbets, Rothmore Spring Conservation. I have some legalese here, but this is in reference to water code and when a board has a rulemaking public hearing. Today's date's Wednesday, August 14th. The first date of the notice in one or more newspapers in Kinney County was Thursday, October 1st, and that's 14 days prior to today's meeting, which is 6 days short of the required 20-day notice in the newspaper. Please also note that the Groundwater District and its general manager were notified by David Palmer on the 12th via email to Kinney, H2O@att.net of this violation of Chapter 361 101D. My request for response or consideration would be that the board be advised that proper notice was not given in regards to public notice in the newspaper. And consequently, rulemaking decisions should be postponed in order to ensure the proper 20-day notice to the public is given. And I'll provide y'all with this paper with the documentation of the legalese at the top.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you giving that to us. I'm aware of that situation and we're fixing to rectify that here in a few minutes. Anybody else have any comment? Anything? Yes, sir.
Curtis Bain. I just want to thank the Lord for sending us some things. We can all go through this. I take my hat off to the board. They all went through a lot lately. And I feel for you. I know you're not getting paid to die. And I was going to say, it's in y'all's hands too. It is in God's hands. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. All right. So, is there anybody else? Okay, we're going to move to the next item on the agenda. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to, Mr. Hibbets is correct. You're correct. But we're going to go ahead and I think we're going to listen to the complaint, but we are not going to take action on anything. Okay? But no proper notice. So y'all understand that. Okay, so let's move to this next item, which is the recess. Now we're going to go into this public hearing. And we want to hear, what I want to hear is the public comments from that, but we are not going to make any decisions over anything. All right? Yeah, go ahead.
You want me to kick it off or?
There you can. Is Greg on there? Is he, where at?
Greg, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I got a legal question for you, Greg. So without proper notice, do we go ahead with this or not? Can we hear the comments but not vote?
Yeah, that's right. The only thing you cannot do tonight is vote on the rule because it wasn't in the paper as soon as that was being 20-day requirement. So I would go ahead and take the comments. And frankly, we probably would have voted on the rule tonight anyway if they're following the comments, but they need to make changes. So go ahead and accept all the comments and you can simply either put this off to the next meeting or send it back to the committee for some additional work, whatever y'all prefer.
Yeah, I wouldn't do any, nobody making any decisions, but we'll listen to the comment that different people have. You can go ahead.
Okay. First off, I want to apologize. I take responsibility for this. The rules changes that we talked about in the June meeting were not the ones that were put forward or not in total. It's my fault. I didn't follow through on it. I was not here at the special meeting, at a charity board meeting out of state, and then got caught up with the airline mess. And anyway, I was in the air. Janelle was nice enough to set it up where I could zoom in. Well, I couldn't. Anyway, talk to the airlines. What I intend to do is get with Greg and in essence, redraft the rules that if the rule committee came up with. This additional rule, the one from section, this says 403. I didn't look it up, but the one that apparently everybody wants to comment on. It was not something that came from the rule committee. It was something that came up the last minute. The board has not had a chance to discuss it. Greg indicated to me that the preferable way to do this is to have a board discussion and then, a proposed rule. as we did with the other things. What I'm going to suggest, and you said we couldn't vote on it, I guess we'd vote to table it. But I'm going to recommend to the board that this thing be set aside, tabled, whatever, until it can come up, properly at a board meeting. Then if it gets by the board, however the board massages it, if they do it all, then we'll start over on it. But as far as I'm concerned, because, what has been pointed out about the 20-day thing, that kills it for tonight. My attitude is we're going to table it and may or may not bring it up again. But as far as the stuff from the rule committee, I will get with Greg and we'll come up with the language, probably put it on the agenda for the September meeting. And in essence, we're going to start over. I think the intent of this was good, but because it was sprung on the public and on the board without board discussion, it's generated a lot of angst in the community on all sides. And because of that, like I said, I take responsibility. We're going to start over on this. So, y'all are welcome to make comments, whatever, but I don't think this thing is going to survive. I can't speak for the rest of the board, but that's going to be my recommendation.
I think that everybody came here with the intent that we were going to have a public hearing and that people were going to be able to make comments. So I want to hear those comments here and now. If you want to make other comments during another meeting, that's fine. But I think that we need to hear what y'all have to say. So, Mr. Hibbets, do you have any kind of comments towards the rule?
This is in regards to the rule that David referenced in regards to allowable pumping based upon a 20-year maximum?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
That's
It would seem to me, if my boss at work told me that I had that my budget was going to be based upon the last 10 years that I had spent money at school, and this year was going to count. And if I had free, I might spend a lot more money this year in order to try to drive my average up. So as a consequence, I would expect that a rule that allows for maximum pumping values to be set based upon some past average might encourage someone to pump more this year in order to drive their average up, as opposed to be conservative on the other side of that coin. That would be my biggest concern with such a rule, is that it would encourage people to not be conservative in order to forestall possible consequences in the future. That's what I've got to say.
Thank you for your comment. Let's see here. Ms. Palmer?
Yes. Good evening. Thank you guys for taking the time to listen to our comments and our concerns. My name is Christy Palmer, and I have been a resident of Kinney County for over 20 years. I appreciate you alleviating some of the concerns that we had ahead of time, Director Dames, but I still would like to read these comments so that they are part of the public record. These comments were written by Terry Marsh, but they also very much reflect my concerns. We're concerned at the absence of changes to the rules that were suggested by Dr. Hutchison and supported by the Rules Committee. In his letter to the board dated September 29th, Dr. Hutchison stated that the following language should be added to Rule 3.02. The current modeled available groundwater in Kinney County should not be used as a permitting factor, since it is not consistent with managing groundwater production to achieve the DFC. While formal votes were not taken by the committee, Rules Committee members generally supported this change, and no member of the committee voiced any objection to it. In addition, changing the reporting requirement from once annually in January each year to monthly reporting was suggested by Dr. Hutchison and supported by the Rules Committee. This is also excluded from the proposed changes. 3.06A, in regard to removing the public hearing requirement for permits of 50 acre-feet or less. When Terry questioned why this change is necessary, she was told that the district never or rarely receives permit requests of this size. If that is the case, we would like to hear a clear explanation of why this rule change is needed. And then Rule 4.03C, the language of this proposed rule is very general. No concrete criteria are specified for declaring a drought stage. Further, the proposed rule states that during a drought stage, permittees may produce an amount of groundwater equal to the maximum amount produced in any one calendar year during the 21 preceding calendar years. While I recognize that this would theoretically prevent production exceeding the highest producing year of a given permit, it appears to state that the maximum amount could be produced regardless of the drought stage, be it stage 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, and without reference to the effect this level of production might have on the DFC. It's the duty of the board by law to manage groundwater to achieve the DFC. With no triggers or stages defined, it's impossible to determine the likely effect of allowing 100% of a highest producing year production level for all permittees on achieving the DFC. And then finally, I'd like to address the manner in which these rule changes were proposed. At the regularly scheduled July 10th meeting, agenda item 18, discussion of further agenda items was passed over deliberately to move on to item 19, an executive session. Upon the board's return from executive session, Board President Matt Bland announced a special meeting for July 23rd. A special meeting announced at the end of a regularly scheduled board meeting after an executive session when most community members have departed, along with the failure to include the rule changes that were proposed by Dr. Hutchison and supported by the rule committee, does not bolster our confidence in the transparency and goodwill of the board to act in the best interest of the public. I hope that the board will decide, and it seems that you have, to table these changes, particularly Rule 4.03, until detailed specific language regarding drought stages is included, and rule changes proposed by Dr. Hutchison and supported by the Rules Committee are also considered for adoption. Thank you.
Do you have a copy of the letter that you sent me on email?
You should all have it. I don't have a copy of it.
It's in there.
No, it's not. Dr. Hill, do you?
Matt, I will
have
send
that
it
letter?
to you, resend it.
All right, hang on.
You have.
What do you say?
Well, this is from Carrie Marsh, that's just what she read. Yeah, I know.
That's that letter. Ms. Boyer?
Hi,
Yes, ma'am.
I'm Tracy Boulware, and I drove in here today, and I was wanting to put in a little bit of my education and background and where I come from. I graduated from A&M a couple of times. My last degree was master's in watershed management and rangeland ecology, and so I have a great appreciation for water usage, and I understand the drought situation around here, and it's happened to us over in Montgomery County. We had to redrill wells down 400 feet deep. We never thought we'd see that day, but it happened. Droughts do occur. The thing I learned when I was working on my master's is one of my research sites was the Lyle Ranch, 40,000 acres right around here. And I don't want to go into great detail, but I'll make it real simple. What we studied was removal of brush, cedar, mesquite, etc. Would it regenerate water? And what we found was yes, it does. And if you will notice our landscape changes over the past 20, 30, 40 years, it's gone heavily trees. Well, every tree you see, just look at it as a person. That tree is consuming the same amount of water daily as a human being. So imagine all these trees consuming all that water. So all the groundwater that you've got at surface level and so many feet deep, it's what's being consumed by these trees. And the federal government does offer programs to help brush removal, which we desperately need. So I just wanted to kind of give that to you as something to think about and to go in a conservation direction, restoring the grasslands of Texas, because this is not a forest land, but it is now. And East Texas is forest, and these trees aren't supposed to be here. And I'd like to see the grasslands restored. That's the native, and it would also regenerate the streams, the rivers, and of course the aquifers. So something to look at, just a noodle around and research, and maybe it'll give everybody a different perspective of conservation to think about. And that's it. Thank you for research. Yeah.
Thank you. Christy, I've got to bring this up. You want to read this? The letter that you wrote?
I'm good because it says the same thing that the letter that you wrote.
Okay.
It's very simple.
All right.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. We have a couple of letters from two different attorney firms that'll be forwarded to our attorney. One is from Carroll and Waldrop, which is basically in opposition to the same thing everybody else did on the the proposed rule 4.03. And the one from McCarthy and McCarthy LLP, addressed to the director, which is the same opposed to rule 4.03. So those will get forwarded to Mr. Ellis. I think that's all of the. Has anybody else got any comments or anything? Yes, ma'am.
So since the public hearing notice wasn't given, we will have another opportunity for comment during the section.
Yes, ma'am. Is there any other comment by anybody?
Just like you say, the lady just gave that about conservation. Also my deal, good place to put money.
Yes, sir.
There's no doubt about it. The more brush you have, the more words you should.
Yes, sir.
My research proved. I mean, it was pretty interesting, to say the least.
Ms. Shahan?
Not knowing that this subject was going to come up, we participate in those programs, and they're very expensive. We treated a good portion of our property, and the funding was reduced. We applied for the funding. It was reduced because of government stuff, USDA, FSA. And a project that should have run us around $20,000 landed up costing us $38,000. That was probably 5 years ago. And the brush is all back.
Who's the one that's running the program? Where's the program come from?
It's federal.
USDA,
That's federal.
FSA, that's federal.
Okay.
And I think we need to lobby and work with our state government and see if we can get some of the $33 billion in surplus that's sitting around. They might donate a couple of dollars.
Yeah, that sounds like something that's doable.
You gotta
We're
have
not
the money, you
representing-
gotta
yeah.
match their fund.
Mm-hmm. So it's a matching fund deal?
The federal one is.
Is it?
Yes.
Maybe something we might talk about later.
I'd just like to say, if you did cedars, you cut that one. And then you go back and cut the other cedars. I don't know about mesquite, weed statute, you know, weed statute. But you need it, I guess, in reach.
Yeah.
And grazing has a big effect on the brush. I mean, overgrazing of cattle causes the overgrowth of brush. And that's something that A&M has taught 50 plus years. But now that everyone probably is getting a little more educated on best grazing practices, that'll help keep it from coming back, but also prescribed burning But the main thing is trying to preserve grasslands. That's the important thing to recharge aquifers. The shallower the wells or more shallow aquifer, your well might run dry. But the deep aquifer, no. I mean, this is the deepest part of the Edwards aquifer in this region. And that really is not affecting our water wells for our daily usage. So,
Yes, ma'am.
I've talked to several people in the past few weeks whose water wells are running dry.
yeah.
And those are ranchers who do work, all the ranchers I know work in best practice to conserve the land, and most don't even need a water permit because they use so little water. And so I think it's a good intention suggestion to look at brush clearing, but there's a free solution that's available to us, and that's pumpers not exceeding their permit limits, and also pumpers reducing whenever the aquifer is low and whenever spring flow is low. And that's the standard across the state of Texas. With counties who have groundwater districts, who have the power to implement those kind of permit limits. And that power exists now. It won't cost you a thing. And I think that's a solution you can seriously look at.
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to know how many permit holders have gone over their permit. Can you board members tell me that?
Hutchison presented in September 2023 that
I'm asking the board.
I don't want any arguments.
I'm sorry,
I don't want any arguments.
I'm not arguing. I'm
I
asking you a question.
don't want anything to start. As far as I know, there is none.
Nobody's gone over their permit.
No, ma'am. Not that I know. Not that I'm aware.
Your permits are ridiculously high.
Which they paid for.
So-
Regardless, I'm still.
I don't want any arguments, people. No arguments. So let's make this all civil. Anybody got any other comments? All right, we're gonna go ahead and get out of this. We're gonna move past item number 5, and we're gonna go right straight to item number 6, which is.
Well, don't we need a motion to table?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
I make a motion that we table all the proposed rule changes and take them up. But anyway, table them. They may or may not take them up down the road. The motion is table.
Okay, I've got a motion. I've got a second. Any further discussion on the item? All right, everybody take a vote in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, motion passes. We'll move to the next item on the agenda, which is discussion possible action approval of minutes from the July 2024 regular meeting and the July 23 special board meeting. Does anybody see any corrections or anything that needs to be made? All right, a motion.
Motion to approve. Second.
Well, I've got a motion to approve by Director Gaines and a second by Director Sean. Any further discussion? All right. Everybody say your prime by aye.
Aye.
Motion moved. Discussion possible action on the financial statements for July 2024.
Total income for the month was $13,884.97. Year to date, $628,185.53. Total expenses for the month, $21,431.82. For the year, $429,317.53.
Motion to approve.
I got a motion on the floor. Now I've got a second by Director Hector Rod. Any further discussion on the item? Approved, signify by aye.
Aye.
Motion has it. Move to the next item, which is review the monthly investment report. Has anybody got any questions about that? I'll move to the next item on the agenda, which is discussion possible action invoices received and invoices paid. Anybody got any questions? Nobody has any questions. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion.
I got a motion. I need a second. All right, I've got a second.
It's just a review on it.
That's it.
Richard.
Richard did.
Richard did.
Okay, thank you.
That's number 8, which is review.
Well,
No, I moved to
It was-
the next
it
one.
was on number 9.
I was on number 9. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion has it. Or item number 10, which is review of the Texas Water Development Board Drought Index and aquifer monitoring data.
Did you want the mud report on that one?
There you have it.
Yes.
What do you?
Well, Randy, I had to call him on. It's been gotten. Mud is at 8 feet, 2 inches static and 13.
Y'all still in stage 3?
We're in stage 3 for 45 days.
45 days.
Last week we had up 15, so we're probably at 20 something days now.
When are y'all gonna start talking about revising your?
We're already doing it. We're working on our drought contingency.
Okay.
We already started it. Rewriting it.
Right.
Because the one that was written, I believe, was back when, what was his name? Mr. Sean, before Randy. What was his name?
Larry Sophie.
Yeah,
Sophie, that's him. Yes. So it's been a long time. It's been a long
Yeah, it's been a while.
Or maybe it was, no, because Randy said that he was involved in it. So, but it's been a while back. I can't remember the
Randy
dates.
was there when Sophie was there. Yeah. Is there anything specific that y'all want to talk about, look at?
Only thing I might suggest that this month he did include a map that shows the rainfall and for each of the 24 rain gauge networks throughout the county, and also those that are reported by Texas Mesonet. And we'll have this put on our website tomorrow. Next time.
All right, well, I think everybody's here to see what Dr. Bill has, so I'm just gonna move into the next item. Item number 11. This is a presentation by Dr. Hutchison.
Okay. Okay, so tonight, originally I was going to talk about the geologic update and the model grid and those sorts of things. But then we got rain. So I'll talk a little bit about the rainfall event of July 23rd, because it all ties in with the geologic work we're doing in the groundwater model. So I always like to show this. This is the 1962 diagram that Bennett and Sayer put in their report on Kinney County groundwater. And it basically is a kind of a cartoonish look at Las Moras Springs and how it emanates from the Edwards formation. Now, the Edwards is not a single unit, it's multiple units, but in this diagram, it only shows as a single unit. And that has been carried through over the years. But one of the things that when I was putting the model together last year, I was having trouble making water move the way we know it moves and get water levels to line up. So as we've talked about in the past, I got some geologists to help us update the geologic framework of the model. And this is what we've come up with, an 8-layer model where we start with alluvial cover and go all the way down to the Glen Rose. Now, what we have here, the layers 5, 6, and 7, this is what Bennett and Sayer call Edwards and associated limestone. So what we've done is subdivide that into 3 separate layers. And this is supported by not only the geologic data, but also, as we'll see in the response from the storm, the hydrologic data. So these are diagrams of the geology. These are 2-dimensional plots of the extent of each particular layer. The first layer is the alluvium. So you can see it's just essentially the drainage network. It's a karst system, so we know that there's preferential flow paths associated with the streams. And so we're using that as a way to move water in an appropriate way. And it's also the place for the most recharge are in these stream channels. The uppermost bedrock layer is the Austin Chalk. Now it only extends to the southern half of the county. It doesn't extend up into the north. And in these diagrams, I'm just showing the thickness, the total thickness. Above that's the Eagleford Shale. Above that's the Del Rio Clay or the Grayson Shale. Now we're starting to get into the Edwards formations. The Salmon Peak or the Georgetown Limestone. And you can see up in the northeast corner of the county, it doesn't exist. The McKnight Formation, the West Oasis Formation, that's essentially the bottom of the Edwards. And then below that is the Glen Rose. We just tack on a constant 600 feet below that just to have a boundary. In cross-section, this is a north-south cross-section. So you can see how the recharge area for the Edwards, now it's going to work, is up here. This is the area that recharges, and the water comes down below these confining layers and the Austin Chalk. And I've located Las Moras Spring on here. You can see here in the map view. So the spring is actually emanating from this light colored thick unit, even though there's all this other material above it. So the water comes in under pressure, flows down, and then pops up at the spring. So we've processed the geologic data into the new model grid, the 8 layers, all the details about that. Most of the cells are less than 50 acres. They're small near the streams and expand out as you move away from the streams. And so the top and bottom elevation of each cell is defined in the grid. And I've already started the tech memo on that. I just haven't had a chance to finish it up. I've also processed, Jim Burton went out and collected all the data from all the various monitoring wells. And I've processed pretty much all of it. There's a couple of them where the instrument failed and they're getting it fixed by in situ. The updated analysis of the satellite data to supplement the meter data, that'll be done in early September. That's needed to extend the calibration period. The permitted well data, it's been a challenge to get good information on the locations of these wells and the permits. We've got that located. we've got the locations, and most of the depth stuff is in there. I'll talk a little bit more about that. And the other tech memos associated with the various other model packages, that just needs to be updated. Now that model grid's done and I extend the calibration period, I can just update those. Now, one of the things this kind of ties in with are the current management zones. The two-dimensional zones that were developed for the management plan back in late 22 are based on correlations between water levels in monitoring wells and the spring flow. No other information was incorporated in that. It was simple correlation. And we need to update that more with a direct link to the permitted wells, as we've talked about. Here's the map that is in the management plan. Now, we have 115 permitted wells. We've got the locations all verified. Only 82 of those have depth data. And some of those are a little questionable. There's a lot of round numbers in there. 3 have estimated data. It just says 1,000 foot plus. And 30 have no depth information at all. So I've got to assign what layer those wells go into, and some will be provisional pending further analysis. But we finally have gotten to the point. This sounds easy to do, but it has been a project that's taken over a year. Yeah. So here's the map that we've got with the locations and the aquifer designations that are based on the permit documentation. And in red, you see up there, these are wrong. These need to be corrected with the updated geology. So you see up north, those were designated as Edwards Trinity Plateau outcrop. And as you move to the south, like in the Pinto Valley, those are called Edward Trinity Plateau subcrop. The blue are the Edwards BFC subcrop. And you'll see that dashed line. It's the boundary between GMA 7 and GMA 10. That is an artificial, it's an artificial boundary. It doesn't mean anything. As you saw in the geology, you don't see that. Edwards is Edwards, east and west side of the county. There's a long history of why the Edwards BFC and the Edwards Trinity Plateau, and this boundary is sort of where it was drawn many years ago by the Water Development Board, basically because this was just a boundary area. So all this BFC and Edwards Trinity Plateau in Kinney County basically is meaningless. These designations are based on that incorrect application of geology. Now, when you get down to the red wells, those are Austin Chalk wells. Those are the shallow wells in those areas. The ones that show Edwards Trinity Plateau, those are deep. Those are the salty sulfur wells. The shallow wells, the Austin Chalk wells, are good water quality. So there's a lot is going to change once we get these. Now that we've got these set up on a map view, now I can go ahead and figure out which aquifer they belong in, and even that's going to be a bit of a challenge. Now, ultimately, what we want to do is assign each permitted well to a zone associated with the potential to impact Loch Moras Spring based on the current DFC. Now, unfortunately, the placeholder map that we put together is really just a two-dimensional look. This is really a three-dimensional problem because depending on the location and the depth of the well, especially south of the highway, whether it's an Austin Chalk or an Edwards Trinity well. So we're going to use a combination of data and models. Now the data, a good example of how we use the data is how everything responded to this last storm a few weeks ago. The model is really useful to supplement, interpolate, and extrapolate, but it doesn't substitute for data. Start with data and the model helps kind of clarify things. So let's talk about the rainfall now. I'll talk a little bit about the rain. Seen some of this, a lot of this material is in Jim's package that you just looked at. Rainfall summary, the spring flow response, the groundwater level response. And down in red, I'm talking, or I put everything, I tried to put everything in the context of the statistical work I did last year on rainfall and spring flow. So we'll start with Jim's map of the rainfall. So he's got rain gauges. He used Texas Mesonet data, and he constructed this map. And it basically shows, in town here, it was a little less than an inch, but there's areas where it was over 6 inches, 7 inches, and it was a nice event. But how big was it? Was it historic? Well, if you remember last year, I put together that statistical work on rainfall and spring flow. And the way I use what's called a box and whisker plot. So I looked at all the data from 1940 to 2022. And basically, you'll see, where's my mouse? There we go. That's your mean. The mean value is in the middle, is more or less in the middle of this box. The box is defined as between the 33rd and 66th percentile. Well, what does that mean? Well, below this box, 1/3 of the data are below this line, and 1/3 is above this line. The whiskers define the 10th percentile and 90th percentile. So these are 10% or above here. There's another 10% down at the low end down here. So this just sort of gives you an idea of where you are in when an event happens. How does it fit in with the history? So this was the plot that was in the report, and it's broken down by month. And so July is somewhere between, depending on what gauge you're looking at, between 3 and 7 inches. So it definitely fits in the upper end. Certainly not higher. There were two Julys. It's my thing. 2 Julys that were even higher than that in history. The higher ones are definitely in the upper 10%. So it was an unusual event, but it wasn't anything unprecedented. And then for fun, you can see how many times rainfall between 4 and 6 inches happened. 4 inches about 4 times, 5 inches about 8 times, and so on. But what happened to the spring? Well, spring was at 0, and it popped way up. And this was I pulled this off about 5:30 this morning. And you can see it rose to about 30 CFS and kept climbing, and then the pool turned over, and then when it came back, now it's down about 20 CFS. And everyone's on, what does that mean? Well, first off, what it means is it's higher than we've had in over a year. Last year, we kind of peaked out at about 8. So this was definitely a big, much higher spring flow. But the other thing about this, remember, this green bar down at the bottom, that represents final data. The USGS posts this data as provisional under the blue bar. And I kind of remember this from 2 years ago. 2 years ago, when we got that big rain in August, we saw the spring come way up, and you watch this site, and the numbers kept changing. And then when they did the final, it was different. So I wouldn't get too attached to the 30 CFS, the 20 CFS. These are not final data yet. These are still provisional. And I talked to Janelle today, and she said that she saw the USGS guy out there. Was it yesterday?
Good morning.
Today? Yeah, so they're out there doing something, checking something, repairing something. These instruments require maintenance, and they require work. So all we know is that there's water in the spring. I wouldn't get too attached to any of these numbers at this point. Now, in terms of the spring flow numbers, again, in July and August, between 20 and 30 CFS, it's definitely on the high end, but it's certainly not unprecedented. It's definitely not even close to the 90th percentile. And again, you can kind of see in July, the 28 to 32, and then in August, the 20 to 32. These are not unprecedented numbers. So we've had rain, We've seen spring flow. What does it mean in terms of recharge? Now, another tech memo I did last year as part of the model development, estimated recharge based on rainfall. There is a link. It's not linear, but there is a link. And we know that rainfall in the winter creates more recharge than in the summer because of the higher evaporation in the summer. So for the summer quarter, here's a couple of historic numbers. About 3 inches of rain yields about 7,200 acre feet of recharge. About 6 inches of rain, about 14,000 acre feet of recharge. So put that into perspective of this annual pumping, spring flow, that sort of thing. And for spring flow, these are very crude conversions. But if the springs go at 30 CFS, that's about 60 acre feet a day. And that means at 30 days, that's 1,800 acre feet a month. 20 to the math, 40 and 1,200. So this just helps put some, one of the problems with pumping is in acre feet, rainfall is in inches, spring flows in CFS, it gets a little confusing. So this is just sort of to help put it into some perspective. Okay, so we've seen rainfall, recharge, spring flow. What happened to the water levels? Well, some wells responded. Some wells increased quite a bit. Some increased a little bit. Some didn't do anything. And that's all part of the work. I put this in just for reference. This is Jim's map. It shows where all the monitoring locations are. The first one's City Well 1. You can, and this is just a short-term look at it from back in December of 23. From April, water levels were going down. Here's my thing. Down. And then the rain hit, boom. 40 foot of increase almost immediately. And you see that the line gets a little thick here. That's because these data are taken every hour. And so every time the well gets turned on, it drops down, then it pops back up. So you can see there's, every time it turns on, it pops right back to where it had been, and then it's on a slower, this lower decline has to do more with just the general trend in the system. And we can even see that after it's popped up, that on-off thing still continues. Here's the mud well. We just instrumented this, so we don't have any historic record on it. But back in beginning of the year, it was a little less than 10 feet. And you get to see the same thing where when it turned on, it drops. Now, not surprisingly, the daily drops are not much in the winter. But then this line gets thicker and thicker in the summer because folks are using more water in the summer. And we see, just like in the city well, starting in the spring, water levels started to drop down quite a bit. And then boom, rainfall hit, 40 plus foot response, recovery. So we see the similar thing from the city well and the Fort Mudd well, the same kind of rapid response in the spring. Okay, here's the Lindsay well. This is about 6 miles northwest of town. And I like this one because this was one of the first ones we instrumented back in 2013. So this record goes all the way back to 2013. And we see again, there was a decline. There was a decline. And then we see a big jump over 40 feet. Now, interestingly, because this one's old enough, we see the response from the August 22 rain, similar kind of reaction. Rose right up and then it started to tail off. And I expect that'll be the same. But this one rose even higher than it did in 22. And so we would expect that if it doesn't rain again, this will start bleeding off some more in several weeks. But the fact that this response has been seen before, just in the last couple of years with another big rain, this tells me this well very much is similar to the city well, the mud well, and the spring. Now we move down south of 90. This is downstream on Pinto Creek, southwest of the road there to 3008. This is an Austin chalk well. Shallow well, it's only 100 feet deep. And here's the big rain event. Oh, nothing happened. We see the well was turned on pretty much all the time and it popped right back up. But there's no big response back. So this well's in the Austin chalk. I'm not seeing any response there. And then finally the Dooley well. This is in Pinto Valley. Now I'm only showing this. This just shows the this last year. And we can see it was dropping. This is January, dropping. Here comes the rain. Oh, it recovered, but only 5, 6, 7 feet. So it's a little different. Still a response, but not near as much as some of these other ones. And just for perspective, again, this takes us all the way back to 13. Here's the response from this last storm. Here's the response from the August 22 storm. Remember in the Lindsay well, it popped right back up. Here, it's taking time to pop back up. And it flowed for a little, well, it was above ground surface. It didn't get above the top of the standpipe, but it did get above ground surface back in early 23. So what I would expect here is this recovery will continue, just like it did in 22. But it does appear to be a different system than Los Moras. They're connected, but not as directly as the Lindsay well. And then we've got the Shahan's windmill at the upper end of Pinto Valley. Same thing. This one only goes back to October of 23, but again, they're on that decline, and then it started to pop back up about 7, 8 feet. It's a fairly shallow well also. Well, one of the things that we know is in the Pinto Creek area, the rainfall wasn't as much. The two rain gauges we have in the Pinto Valley, 1.5 inches and 2.4 inches, as compared to over 3 inches, some 6 inches, 5 inches up here in the northern part of the county. No? What's wrong with my data?
It was reported out of their gauge, 4 inches of rain over there in that area of 2804.
Where'd you get the data?
The owner.
This is what we had.
I mean, we had 3.5 right there at that South Pinto windmill.
Still not 5 or 6.
Hmm?
Still not 5 or 6 like in some of the other places.
Well, but I'm just saying,
No.
the gauges don't reflect everything.
Yeah. Well, we know the one gauge that showed Pinto Creek showed nothing. There's no water in that even.
Oh, that's your gauge. You have the water flow.
This is one at the highway, yeah.
Been like that for 5 years.
Yeah. Well, no. There was a little water in it in 22, 2020, 21, 22. Okay, so it appears that Los Moras, the mud well and the city wells are part of some deeper flow system that benefit from the rain far, far away. In the Pinto Valley, it seems like it's more limited to a shallower flow system that's just responding to that lower rainfall in the area and didn't benefit as much from the big groundwater level recovery. So we know that the karst development is going to influence the flow. When I say shallow, I'm not talking about 100 feet. I'm just talking about relative to the deeper system. So we know that this is going to basically the flow directions are going to subparallel the drainage networks because of the preferential flow paths. And we know that the West Oasis heads towards Uvalde County. And we know that Pinto is moving to the southwest. in the Las Moras Creek area, that's going to head more, a little more southerly. And the deeper system is going to come from further away, recharge a much bigger recharge area, and it's going to flow basically towards Las Moras Spring. Now, the fact that you've got flow directions kind of going in different ways in a two-dimensional sense is very difficult to conceptualize, but when you add a third dimension to it, it starts making sense. Now, these all have to be tested with the model. That's one of the reasons you collect data. You try and understand it, and then see if you can reproduce it in the model where it's physically based. And that's the next step. So the fact that we had, and this is really, the board is to be commended because the investment they've made in these instruments and the time and effort that goes into collecting the data, this is why we can understand what happened 3 weeks ago. 10 years ago or 11 years ago when we started this program, we could only dream that we would have data to be able to understand it at this level. So the investment is paying off. So again, going back to the idea of the simple cartoon that Bennett Sayer put together, their cartoonish way of including the karst. Well, if there's something in the deeper portion that's different, that's different than the shallow portion, then you can get these different flow directions, and we'll have a better understanding of how all this interacts once we have a few moments to plug all this into the model. So with that, I'll see if y'all have any questions now.
Anybody got any questions? Oh, well, so you think the Pinto may come back and at some time in the future a little,
Well, all I can tell you,
since it's shallow.
all I can tell you is that we're seeing what we're seeing is the directed immediate connection we saw in the mud well, the city well, and the spring. But in 22, we saw a while for that Dooley well to come up. So the shallow flow system is still connected to the deep flow system. It just takes a while for it to respond. So we're not going to see, it's not an immediate direct influence, but the data certainly show over the next several weeks, we would expect the Dooley well to come back up. And just like, we didn't see the creek come back in that process, but we have seen the creek flow low amounts in the past, but that may not happen this time. But the Dooley well will continue to rise up even when the others may start dropping off. And so it's that connection between those two flow systems that will tell. And this is what we're going to test out with the model, keep collecting data, refine our understanding as more data come in. And remember, a lot of these instruments only went in the last year or so. We were not able to get into the mud well until just now. So it's
Dr. Bill,
a puzzle.
Let's see.
does Jim have a map of where the rain gauges are located, where
Yep.
his rain gauges are located? Will that be available on the website?
That's his map there. And
Does he have the long lats of where the rain gauges are?
It's rain gauge.
we've got them. Yeah.
And this will be on the website.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Dr. Hutchison, you would like to see more rain gauges, I would assume too, right? The more the better. Like, would you be better served if there was a few more?
Well,
That's plenty to do what you need to do, or might the board think about more of those? Or?
Jim's been adding them.
Yeah.
I mean, as you can see, the real benefit of this was the Lindsay well and the Dooley well that we've been monitoring for 11 years. So a lot of times a lot of these data that we have now, we only go back a couple of years. So the benefit isn't for today, it's for 10 years from now.
And I heard something, I was listening to a podcast. Is there some or potential in the future for sharing of what Kinney County has done with these rain gauges, Jim? And you know what you know from your own gauges. Is there an overlap anywhere between our gauges and Quad 807?
Yeah, well,
actually, gauges, like where are their gauges?
A lot of these are from the Texas Mesonet. There's already a program run by the Water Development Board. You can go on their website and see all the rain data you want.
And is that where Quad 807 is derived from, or how does, when Quad 807 comes out in the spring, where is that data? Where are those gauges?
All these.
They're the same
The
gauge.
Water Development Board is the one taking all those data and then developing the statewide quad system maps.
Okay.
So that's all, those are all Water Development Board questions on the precise methods they use.
Yeah, I don't know what that.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, that's on your chart on the Lindsay well.
Yes, sir.
You got it 6 miles northwest, isn't it, northeast?
I'm sorry. You're right.
Yeah.
Good catch. That's a typo.
I'm confused.
On the down south by Standard Lane, 693, the wells have had no response. No recharge, no. I mean, in fact,
Some of them, there's a couple of them that popped a little bit,
they
2-3 feet.
you know, but like, no more pressure, no more gallons per minute coming out. So how does that tie into your,
Well,
with all the rainflow where it's done nothing?
yeah, I didn't include any of the wells down to the south, the Edwards wells. The old Stinky did show about a 2 to 4 foot response. I think there was another one that I wasn't real sure of because we don't have a lot of historic data on those.
Jim is monitoring.
Yeah, we've got all the data on those. Yeah, I just didn't include them in here, but that's a complicated system, and part of it is we don't have a lot of good information on the depths of some of those wells, and so it's hard to distinguish where they're completed.
1,500.
Yeah.
That dropped it, the drawdown came up until the beginning of April or so. I believe that's because they switched the pumping from mud well number 1 to mud well number 2. That's why it goes from a foot drawdown closer to 5 foot drawdown.
Right. We see the same thing in the city well. They don't use it as much in the winter.
But it's a separate well.
Yeah, I know there's another well. Yeah.
In regards to the springs that feed Pinto or Mud Creek, are there models existing for the architecture?
Yeah, the
model architecture for those.
Yeah, the model I'm developing will include mud and Pinto and the other kind of seepy areas. Yeah. Yeah, I showed you the plot for Pinto. We also have a monitor in Mud Springs. Or I showed you for Pinto, and we have another. I didn't put the graph in for Mud Springs, but we've got a similar kind of setup for that. And it has a little water in it more than Pinto.
One more question about the process, Dr. Hutchison, if you could. I know, in June, like Director Gaines was saying, the board went over some rules, and being on the rules committee from before, I saw your product that you recommended, the rules that have been mentioned in this meeting. I know too, Director Gaines, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but when the rules were proposed by the board, they go to the lawyer, Mr. Ellis, and he comes back and rewrites them and gives his opinion to the board. I would assume that you also see the proposed rules, and I don't know if you verbally, coach the board on what you think about them, or maybe you produce a paper product like on this rule I think this, or on this rule I think this. Do you do something like that?
Well, I put a letter together back in September. Yeah, and those were I had the 3 recommendations that were ultimately
That's the one I saw.
that were ultimately adopted by the rules committee, and then the 4th one was about I was mainly talking about triggers, not so much about the drought policy as a big picture thing, but more focused on thresholds and triggers and that sort of thing. And in that one, I kind of deferred that we're still doing this work, to finish this up.
But specifically, like when the board decides we're gonna propose these rules, we're gonna post these rules and comply with all the 20 days in the whatever paper, will you have a chance before those rules are published and put to the public to weigh in on what your opinion professionally is on those rules?
I do.
I mean, that's to the board, but I would hope that the board would submit their proposed rules to you, and then you might help them with your opinion on it. I would hope that happens.
As I said before, in essence, I fumbled that whole.
No, I'm not saying, I'm just
Oh,
saying,
no, I did.
the rule
But-
go to
but-
Dr. Hutchinson.
On proposed rules 2.0 coming up. Yeah. I mean,
That was always the,
yeah,
when we went through the rules.
there'll be a lot
committee,
more coordination.
Whatever came out of the rules committee, the plan was it was gonna go to the lawyer and to the hydrologist, and then it was gonna be, fine tuned, and then it was gonna come back and then it would go.
That didn't happen, but.
So, but this time maybe it could. Thank you.
I'd just like to know, you may not know the answer to it, I don't, but how many acre feet did it recharge during all that rainfall? Or do you have an estimate? Okay.
You had a slide on
Yeah.
it.
Okay, yeah.
It's somewhere between 3 and 7 inches because it was different.
But how much?
And that means it's somewhere between 7,200 and 14,000 acre feet in the Edwards.
Yeah. So you don't know what pit those is?
Well, I didn't break it down.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just doing rough numbers for just because I wanted to put that into some perspective. There were some wild estimates of, how much recharge there was. And I said, well, 7, 14, some number like that, all in, a couple days.
Anybody else got any questions? Anybody? Well, I've got a question for you, Dr. Bill. I want you to tell me what is this board supposed to be doing as far as its rules are concerned?
This district and any district in the state has 3 primary responsibilities: planning, management, and regulatory. Planning is done on a DFC, at a joint planning level, the DFCs. Those are planning goals. Statute requires then that you write a management plan that takes into, among other things, takes into account the DFC, how you're going to manage to meet the DFC, and then how you're going to implement, and then your rules or your regulatory program is how you implement that management plan. From 2009, when I first started working or helping the board, that's back when I was with the Water Development Board, your focus had always been long-term, big picture stuff. The DFC was set on the spring to essentially, in very general qualitative terms, not let the spring go below what it historically had flowed. So you were taking a long-term view. And the biggest concern back then, and had been for many years and still should be, is what happens if a permit application is filed for a big water export. Current pumping up to the last couple of years was about 5,000 or 6,000 acre feet. In the last couple of years, it's been about 10 or 11,000. What if a permit application came in looking for 30? That's a different game. And so everything we've done or tried to do in the context of planning, management, and regulation was to get a good firm hold technically on what would happen if there was a big permit application and how would you deal with it. So this board has, at least in my experience, has always been long-term, forward-looking, proactive in that sense. That's why you spend all the time and money for me and Jim to put instruments everywhere, do these models, do all these calculations, do all these analyses. That's different than this drought management concept, which is sort of reactive. So it's sort of a fundamental decision from history and from a statute. You're required to be proactive and look forward, planning, management, and regulation. And in fact, most of the districts I work with don't have drought management plans because they're focused on the big picture, long-term stuff.
So in essence, what you're saying is if the city of Brackettville or Fort Clark Mud has their drought contingency plans in place, that would be something that we would basically stay out of their way and just deal with what we have to deal with.
You're dealing with, they've got their issues and their things they have to deal with. You have your jobs. And my understanding has always been your job has been big picture, long-term planning, management, regulation on that basis, not doing essentially the same thing that MUD or City of Brackettville is doing. That's just my opinion.
Well, it's always been my contingency that that's what we were supposed to be doing.
Yeah. So
another question,
and this is just, and like I said, this is the same kind of thing that a lot of other districts I work with, they're focused on long-term DFC kind of thing that sort of help steer the ship, as opposed to worrying about all, day-to-day, year-to-year type stuff.
So do we have a failure to meet our DFC?
Well, the management plan talks about a specific method of how you go about measuring to see if you are consistent with the DFC. We applied that. I wrote a letter that said because we do this once a year, we have one shot to look at it. And on that day, on December 31st, once the data were in, it showed that we were just a little bit below that band that showed that, it was a little bit below that, what it should have been. Now, the management plan is very clear that there's a variety of things that you can do if that were to happen. First, you have to decide whether that's something that's a persistent thing. You have to decide whether there's some special conditions. So I looked at one of the things I looked at was the evaporation. That was higher than it's been. The last couple of years has been higher than it's ever been. So that certainly had an effect. The big pumping increase, a large part of it was due to the higher evaporation rates. Farmers don't want to pump, it costs them money. So they had to pump to meet that evaporative demand. So that may have had some effect on it. We've also seen, when I did the analysis, it's complicated because we lost the gauge in 2014 and we've got a new gauge, so I had to go to a different method. And when I put the method together, it showed a couple of dots just outside the bounds, one high and one low. That didn't mean that we didn't need it. That just meant I was trying to be honest with the way I set up the bands. So I don't think that particular point was terribly significant, especially as close as it was. In other words, I don't think not meeting it this last year means that we will definitely miss it next year. The biggest thing is 5 years of drought. We haven't seen that before. Certainly not anything recently, without any intervening rains. And this rain that we got a couple of weeks ago was great. But if it doesn't rain again, we'll be back in the same boat next summer. So one of the things that your management plan already contemplates is that if there's some change condition, you can change your DFC. Well, we're fixing to do that anyway, because the new deadline's coming up in 2026. So we're going to be, once I get the model done and we can start looking at that, we can put it in a more comprehensive framework to understand what the implications of that are next year once the model's done.
Dr. Hutchison, until that happens, is not the board required to manage to the current DFC until the DFC is changed?
Read the management plan because
I understand.
It talks about what happens if you're below that one of those lines. We're below the line, and I laid out what their options are.
I read it. I have it.
Yeah.
I understand that, but fundamentally, the board manages to the DFC that's currently in place.
Okay.
And then they have options what to do.
The one thing you got to do is not turn that little dot below the line into an IRS level violation.
No, I understand.
No, I mean, it's serious because a lot of people around the state want to turn DFCs into regulatory limits. It's easy to do, it's easy to say, but there's reasons why it should not be. There's reasons why corrections can be made to those limits, and the evaporation is a good reason for that. The fact that we're dealing with a gauge that only has 10 years of data plays into that. And that's why the management plan is written the way it is. So just because that one dot fell below it a little bit does not turn it into a level where you got to go run to TCEQ and say, we're not doing our job. It's not that big of a deal because we've seen just in the last couple of weeks, boom, pops back up.
Okay. And then, do you have data on the irrigated acre change? I know in the report, you said you're switching on the 2023 irrigated acres. Did you have that now? And did it change or?
We've got the meter data and
the amount of irrigated acres, you know what I mean? Is there more irrigated acres?
Let me answer. I talked about it a little bit in the thing. Back in 22, we did the satellite. I have to think about this a second. We did the satellite work through. Did we do 21 and 22 or just 21? I don't remember. Anyway, I've got the guys doing that again, and I'll have that in September because I'm going to update the model to be as complete as possible time-wise. So we'll have that information.
Going back to whatever you said, the long-term approach in 09, when nobody came in, was you meaning for an application to add 30,000 acre feet to the allotted acre feet, like the 77 or 76? Is it on top of that, or is it within that? What were you meaning by that? Clarify that.
It could be either one.
Yeah, that's
Folks could come in and request a whole new permit on top of the existing permits.
Does that change?
Someone could also come in and say, I want to convert these existing historic and existing use to an export, which doesn't change the total, but it would definitely represent a pumping increase because most of that permitted amount has not been pumped historically. So either scenario would fit into that big picture of what we're trying to get information to deal with if that day ever came.
Got another question for you, Dr. Bill. Here in the near future, I mean, there's been talk about in the past about dissolving these rural districts and consolidating into a regional district. What is the possibility of something like that?
That's a political question.
Yeah. What do you think?
The pressure to regionalize groundwater management has always been there ever since, over 20 years that I know of. I don't think it's gone away. I don't think it's gotten any particularly hotter the last couple of years, but it's always out there. It just depends. There's a lot of folks that like the districts and like the local approach. Others think it's no good. So it's just a matter of what sort of. My guess is that if it ever were to be a push, it would come from an unknown and be an unknown place, and it would be caused by something that we probably would have trouble anticipating. But it's always something that's kind of in the background.
How do you think the district should move forward with what we're doing? So we should be more concerned about the spring, or should we be more concerned about the future?
Well, the spring is the natural integrator of the whole hydrologic system. So from a technical standpoint, using the spring as sort of the barometer, if you will, makes sense. I know Greg doesn't agree with that. There's some legal reasons for that. I'm not going to, try to defend what he said or explain what he thinks, but from a technical perspective, the spring is the best place to do it, because if you have a well or something, I mean, you can do more than spring and a well, but the spring needs to be a consideration just because of the natural system. It's the natural drain of the system. And there's good data.
That makes sense. Anything else? Ms. Davis?
Could you go back to that slide where it showed the different greens and that light green one that fed the spring?
That one?
No, it's like layers.
It's the one where you identified where the spring was.
Oh, the cross section.
Uh-huh.
And one of your very first.
Yeah.
There you go.
There you go. Okay, so, and then you had that the Lost Moras Spring water flowed from the light green one?
Right. It comes from, the spring is at the surface here. The spring is obviously at the surface, but the source of the water is down here.
Is it the light green one or all of them?
Well, it's 4, 5, and 6. So it's this, everything above the dark green, or the, basically, this is the bottom part. That's layer 6, or in this, they don't have the aluminum on here. This is layer 7, 6, and 5. So basically from this light green through this light blue to this sort of, I don't know.
Mustard color.
And so this may be a crazy question because I'm not sure what I'm asking you here. Do you know how deep the spring is?
Well, that's the thing. No one knows that's kind of the point. Is this was the little diagram they put together in 1962, and it's all kind of cartoony with the karst formation, the cavities, the cavern type formations, and you can see it sort of in the bottom half of that formation. But no, the short answer is we know what the top of the Glen Rose is in that area. So it's somewhere above that, but below the Del Rio clay.
I can't remember the geologist's name that came to the 700 Springs Ranch presentation where, I mean, that's just an amazing thing to see. But he was talking about how when there's shifts in the plates, and he like had data on when those springs appeared, and it's almost like you wondered if you went on top of the hill behind on the north side of the highway that connects Rock Springs and Junction. If you drilled a deep well, you might get a spring up there because you would hit into that plate. And what he said is anytime there's going to be another seismic earthquake type thing, the plates could shift and all those springs could go away. And so what I'm wondering is how firm is our plate system here where.
Well, first of all, keep in mind that if you drill, you can see up here in the northern end of the county, the light green is at the surface. So it's right there it's exposed. That's how it gets recharged. It all gets recharged up here. So if you drill a well up at the northern end of the county into the Edwards, one of these Edwards units, it won't flow because it's already exposed to the atmosphere. You only get spring flow or a flowing, you only get the pressure basically comes from the movement of the water down dip. And the water level then is above the land surface. The Dooley well flows, spring flows. And so you're only going to see that towards the end of the flow system where there's something capping it. So drilling up on top of a mountain, you're not gonna get a spring. You're only gonna get a spring
If you
down.
went deep enough, though, right? You might, no, it wouldn't.
No.
Okay. All right. Now, the next question is, if you drilled past those layers into the green, the Kelly green, would you not have water? Have you got to
In that-
stop wherever?
In this particular area, the chances are very low that you would hit water in the Glen Rose.
So you've got to stop wherever the water is, right?
Right.
To follow up on that, those people that live up there that have wells are more or less tapping what they call cave water up there. I mean, like,
Yeah, I mean, we've got those monitors up at the state park. And the Crown over the Kickapoo wells. And so we've got monitors up there. We can see how things respond up there. It provides a good background to what we're doing down here. I didn't include those in the presentation, but yeah, that's all part of the model. The model is going to cover the entire county. So we've got that.
So those wells up there might affect your spring flow if they started pulling off.
Well, not that much. I mean, they're small little wells for, domestic purposes. They're not going to affect it. If you drilled lots of wells, pumped a lot of water, then yeah, it could. But from a practical standpoint, with what's up there
If
now,
you had irrigation wells that are extremely deep, how would they affect this?
well, that's what we're trying to figure out. If you have, we see that the mud well and the Bracketville well, they respond just like the spring did to the rainfall. We also see with our instruments, when they turn those wells on, you can see a response in the spring pool. Okay. Now, when you get into irrigation wells further away, like in Pinto Valley, we're seeing a long-term effect, but not a short-term response, which means they're connected, but not directly. That's what we're seeing in the data from this rain event. And we see that in other correlations that we've done with that. And that's why I'm building the model, is to help answer those level of questions.
And so with a big rain event on the east side of the county, if they were connected, would it not change the level of the wells in the west side of the county?
Well, that's what we're doing. I mean, that's exactly what.
And it didn't show that, right?
Yeah, it showed responses. Every one of those red dots, we have an instrument in. So we've got all these wells, and I'm just showing the ones to kind of illustrate some certain things about the three-dimensional aspect of the system. So we've got this one further to the south that didn't respond at all. Others responded a little bit. So that's what we're trying to piece the puzzle together.
But would they have responded a little bit if they got rain too?
Well, yeah, any stress, whether it's rain or pumping, you're going to see you're putting a stress on the system, so you're going to see a response.
How impactful are dams? Say, for instance, okay, our recharge comes mainly from the northeast part of Kinney County, is that correct? Say around the Boring Mountain area, Live Oak Creek, if there's dams there, would that affect the flow, downward flow to Los Moras?
We have to be specific.
Okay, so at
Because-
the top of 334,
Well, here,
if there's a bunch of dams
let me
damming up.
well, let me show you here. If you get to the northeast in the white area,
Mhm.
this is layer 5, layer 6, and layer 7. So if you're getting up in the true northeastern part, most of that, pretty much that water is going to Uvalde County. In general, if you were to dam something up, all you're doing is providing more opportunity for recharge.
So the water in Montel, Campwood, if they get rainfall there, it doesn't come to us.
Camp Wood, oh, it definitely.
Montel and Campwood.
Oh, yes.
Okay,
That's
so-
a big, that's one of the things that we learned, or we've seen in the past. Oops, where'd my rain gauge go? All these, we got Camp Wood on there, and we got some rain gauges up there. That deeper flow system, we definitely see a response from when it rains heavily up in Edwards County.
And so does that rainfall that they get there also go to Uvalde County? And
Some of it does. That's the problem is
That's
that
the layer.
that's the layering thing where some of it's going this way, some of it's going this way. It's a complex 3D puzzle. And and we saw this with the dye study too, that stuff went all kinds of directions. Well, it depends on what the gradients are at that time. So if you have rain in a particular area and not in another, and then 3 months later it switches, well, the water's moving this way and then moving this way. So it can get rather complicated. And when you're doing a model, you don't want to get caught up in day-to-day stuff. You want to look at big picture stuff, because the concept here, I've always thought, was to consider long-term big picture stuff, not get caught up in what happens yesterday. Now, this one was a little different because it did provide such a good stress to the system where we could see the response and see the differential response in different places and different wells.
So your answer to that is if damming was happening in the upper northeast of Kinney County and our recharge comes from Campwood Montel, damming the waterway there would not affect what we would get to Los Moras or.
It might even benefit it.
Excuse me?
It might even benefit it, because if you're holding a pond of water, then you're having more opportunity for it to leak out.
Thank you.
I have a question. Yeah, that's a good segue too. And as far as the long-term approach with the Dooley Wall area northwest of the springs, the response time of recharge to that area relative to the springs is slower, but it's still Edwards Aquifer water. And so if water is being removed from that area, would it not make that a direct connection to what's in the aquifer and what's allowed to?
Don't oversimplify this. Please don't oversimplify this. This is complex. It's not fully understood. This is a set of data that shows certain things that are consistent with the way I'm putting the model together. The model will help clarify. And don't get hung up on the concept of shallow and deep, because those are relative terms. And all I can tell you is that look at 2022, August of 22. We saw a big rain, we saw a big recovery, but in the Dooley well, that took a long time, several weeks, for that recovery to be fully realized. We're seeing a start of that pattern out of this storm. Folks are saying, oh, it only rose 3 feet. It's totally separate. No, it's not totally separate. Everything's connected. It's a matter of degree. And how that plays out will have a big effect on how things are managed and how things are viewed. But everyone wants to make this black and white, and I'm tired of it, because everything gets twisted. Things are connected, yes. Are they connected like the city well is? Or is Pinto Valley connected like the city well is? No. But it is connected, and you can see this bear out in the data where things respond sometimes very quickly, sometimes it takes a little while. Well, that means there's something going on where the water is moving and then moving a different direction, or moving up or moving down, something like that. That's what I'm trying to work through. And jumping to all this is where some of this stuff isn't always helpful, because it seems like I don't want to make it sound like I understand it all completely today. I'm still working through it. And a lot of this is you're seeing a work in progress. And having leading questions and things being twisted into statements make it very difficult to do this kind of work in this environment.
From what you just said, I thought I was saying the same thing, that they're connected and that in a relative way, the timing is different in which one.
Based on the history, I disagree with you, because what you mean when you say connected is different than what other people may think is connected.
She's not saying equally connected as the other portion.
I'm just
what do I mean?
I know I'll get in trouble for this, but respected scientific journal called Facebook and the Kinney County Post have twisted things to make it really difficult to do this work. And saying words like connected and isn't it true that it makes it hard. So give us the time. We've spent a lot of time and a lot of money collecting the data. We've been transparent, trying to make everything available as real time as we can. We're still putting it together. We've got a deadline. We're going to meet it, and we're going to take care of this.
I do want to just say again, I don't think I'm saying anything different than what you were saying, and I am asking the question in the context of a board meeting where there's an elected board sitting before us that we elected to manage the groundwater, and that involves some enforcement along with long-term planning. And I'm trying to ask questions to understand how the policy can match the data.
It's not an exact science. It's always
Right.
changing.
Well,
It takes years to.
It is an exact
see
science.
trends.
It's an exact science if you have perfect knowledge. Any science is exact if you have perfect knowledge. Gravity works because it's real easy to see. Everything else, we're dealing with a lot of uncertainty. I had a young student, an undergraduate, called me one day, and we were talking about things, and she asked me, "What's the biggest thing you have to deal with?" And I said, "You got to be comfortable with uncertainty, because you're not going to have all the data, you're not going to have all the answers, and you got to be able to get your way through that as best you can." And I've been, I post all these things on Google Drive for folks to read. It's not read. Things get misquoted, things get twisted, and it makes it harder than it needs to be. I'm working on it in the spirit of collaboration and cooperation, and it doesn't always work. It's not always a two-way street. So, we're doing our best on this, and I think we've made a lot of real progress. And the fact that this rain came when I was already going to be coming over here, it was a bit of a scramble to put these together on short notice. But I think it shows things that we were pretty confident of before, but it really kind of confirmed a lot of stuff. And the geologic work, we started that end of last year, and it's proven to be correct to split things up into layers.
Travis, do you have anything? That's true.
Yes, sir.
You got any questions or anything?
Yes, sir.
All right. Anybody else got anything? I'm going to wrap this up.
I think we already give Dr. Bill and the board and all the staff members here for doing all.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now I'm going to make one other statement. This is one of the deals that was in one of these documents here about, if we weren't doing this and that, maybe TCQ. I'll invite TCQ in here on Monday. And if they say we're doing everything we're supposed to, then what? Because I don't see any of these board members, anybody else here doing anything that they're not supposed to be doing. But yeah, every time we turn around, you're not doing this, you're not doing that, blah, 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 and it just keeps going on. This can be wrapped up and it can be finished. All I got to do is I want to call them on Monday. They're going to come over here and we're going to have a little chat. And we're going to make sure that your complaints will be turned into them. If you got any more complaints about the district, you turn it into TCQ.
They're groundwater, they're not groundwater, y'all.
Well, it depends.
TCQ is surface water.
When people start telling us that they're going to turn stuff into TCQ, go ahead and turn it to TCQ. You turn it into whoever you want.
The TCQ takes care of the surface water. Y'all govern groundwater.
There are certain things that TCQ does that monitors districts. So it's neither here nor there. But when somebody wants to write something there, they're going to turn this into TCQ. Get after it. That's simple. So With that being said, Dr. Bill, thank you for everything that you do for us.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you,
Bill.
Dr. Bill.
Excuse me?
We're gonna move on to the next item on the agenda. It's item number 12, discussion of possible action, proposed budget 2024-25 September. This is not, if y'all are gonna talk, Darlene, if y'all are gonna talk and just override us, then it's time to go.
She was asking me a question. I'm sorry. I was answering her.
We're back to the taking care of business. So if y'all want to leave, y'all can leave, but I'm not going to sit here and try to overtalk everybody that's in this room. All right, so we're going to go into item number 12, discussion possible action, proposed budget for the fiscal year 2024-2025, set time and date. For public hearing on a proposed 2024-25 annual budget. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Pass that.
All right.
Board items 12, 13, and 14 are essentially it's just we need to just set a time for the public hearing, like next month. But
Yes, sir.
is there any reason to get into details now, or just
No, sir.
or
Not unless
air it out at the?
jumped out at you with some question really popped up or some figure or whatever.
No.
I think this first sheet pretty much explains.
Yeah.
So really, all we need to do is just set the time and date for.
Right.
Okay.
In other words, accept the proposed budget for 24-25 and set the public hearing.
Proposed tax rate drop. Fee schedule remain, the recommendations that to remain the same.
Right.
All right, I make a motion that items 12, 13, 14, that we set the time and date for the September meeting. Except for the moment as is, we'll discuss it in September for final. But set the public hearing to coincide with our September meeting.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Anyway, I'll make the motion on 12, 13, 14. Do it in September and move on.
All right, do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a second. Is there any further discussion on that?
And if y'all have any next few weeks, if y'all have after you have time to look over this again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to give me a call. I'm best to answer them.
It was straightforward.
No, that's fine. All right, so is there any other further discussion on it? All right. You signify by aye. Aye. Motion carried. Move to the next item, which is.
This is the same kind of thing we did last month with the other property.
Yes, sir.
All right, I'll make a motion we
Well, hang
accept.
on.
I'll make a motion we accept.
One second. So we got, this is a discussion, possible action, the Kinney County Appraisal District offered by Joe Aleman to purchase trust property, Unit 15, Lot 31. And I had a motion to approve it by Stan.
By Charlie.
Oh, by Charlie.
Second.
All right, you second it. Okay, any further discussion on this item? Motion by aye. All in favor, aye. Item number 16 is discussing possible action purchasing cyber liability and data breach response coverage. What's that detail?
Okay, this is through, as y'all are aware of, whole insurance packages through the Texas Municipal League. And something that we've had for several years is a cyber coverage, if you will. It has been very reasonably priced until just recently. The 23-24 contribution was, I think we had the core the Core Plus,
$175.
which was $247.24. However, it's going, if we want to continue the cyber liability and the data breach response recovery, then we need to, if we don't go ahead and approve something, we have to opt out of it and would not have any coverage. For this next year, if we wanted to go with just the basic, it would be $1,000 for the year. If we wanted to go with the plus, it would be $1,250 annually. And what this, there's been a number of throughout the state, a number of governmental entities that have had like cyber attacks, if you will. I think it's become more prevalent. And so it's just, we've always had, some nominal coverage because of.
Did we have the plus last year?
Yes, sir, but it was only $247.
Actually, it says we had the core coverage last year,
Yes, sir.
not the core plus. So it was only a 175.
Right,
Yeah, read the
Yeah.
top of that same page.
right.
Which shows we had core last year
Yes, sir.
or this year.
But I think it's something, I went ahead and allowed money in the budget for it. I think it's something that and in talking to other.
Would you recommend the core or the core plus this time around?
That's tough. For $247 for the year.
No, for an extra 250 is all we're talking about.
From 1,000 to 1,250.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, last year's 175. What we're talking about, the
Yes.
core plus would be 1250.
Right, 1250.
I'll make a motion. We do the core plus.
Thank you. We'll get the application filled out.
Yeah, it's got to be done within the next 40 days or something.
Thank you.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the item? Take a vote. Favor?
All right.
Okay, let's move to the next item on the agenda is discussion and possible action of the amend the 2023-24 budget to transfer funds between line items.
Explanation seem reasonable. I'll make a motion that we
Transfer funds.
let's make the line item changes as recommended. Transfer funds, yeah, whatever. Vote to make a motion to transfer funds between line items.
Okay, I've got a motion.
I'll
I've
second.
got a second. Any further discussion on the item? Members take a vote. Aye. All right, move to item number 18, General Manager's Report.
Just an interesting side note, if you will. Since I've gone back and checked since the 1st of October, the beginning of this fiscal year, there have been 13 exempt wells drilled throughout the county. So that's not as many as we've had in years past. I guess about average, not quite as many. But those now, some of those were, some of them were dry holes, some of them were pretty good wells. And we did have another one come in, that application come in today on that. Aside from really reporting on anything else, I think the insurance, the fact that our insurance is going to be going up somewhat in addition to the cyber coverage. We know that our insurance we don't have the exact amount yet, but it will be going up, which is understandable. Because we didn't have an increase last year and the year before last. Other than that, there's really nothing else to report this time.
Anybody have any questions?
I do have something for a future agenda. We'll put it on. We'll have it on for next time. Get some new chairs. Our board chairs are kind of embarrassed me.
Yeah, new chairs. And you can just put that on next month's agenda. Dr. Bill, do you have anything to put on next month's agenda for anything you can think of?
I would like to put on the agenda, I mean, in essence, the rules we've, the rules committee came up with, kind of 2.0, as I said before. I want those rules brought up next month. Also, we've been working on a drought plan. I want to start the board discussion on approving that, approving or not, whatever. But
So can you add that to the? Any other directors want to have anything on the agenda? Y'all think of anything else? Move item number 20, which is adjournment. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Second motion, and a second. Let's see here. We're adjourned at 7:57 p.m. Thank y'all for coming.